My beloved child, do not scroll away from this moment. Something has been pressing against the silence around you, and you may have felt it without knowing how to name it. Perhaps it came as a sudden heaviness in your chest, a thought of someone appearing from nowhere, a memory returning at the exact hour you were trying to forget, or a strange sense that something unfinished is moving closer. Pause here for a moment, because what you are about to hear is not a message of fear. It is a story of truth reaching the edge of silence. The person connected to your heart has been carrying words they once believed they could postpone, and now something inside them is telling them that postponement has become more painful than honesty. They are beginning to understand that time does not always announce when a season is about to change. Sometimes it simply changes, and suddenly all the things we thought we could say tomorrow become the things we wish we had said yesterday. You have wondered why the energy around this connection has felt so unusual lately. There have been moments when you sensed closeness without communication, movement without evidence, emotion without explanation. One part of you tried to dismiss it. You told yourself not to read too much into silence. You reminded yourself that people make their choices, that if someone wants to speak, they will speak. And there is wisdom in that. But there is another layer you could not see. Their silence was never as empty as it appeared. Behind it, an entire conversation has been happening inside them. They have rehearsed sentences while staring at a ceiling. They have imagined your reaction while walking alone. They have opened messages and closed them again. They have thought about the beginning, the misunderstanding, the distance, the things they did not explain, and most of all, the one truth they kept protecting because they were terrified that once it was spoken, nothing between you could ever return to what it was before. That is why this moment feels urgent. Not because heaven is threatening you with a clock, and not because your destiny depends on chasing someone. The urgency belongs to them. Their heart is reaching the point where hiding is becoming impossible. Something has shifted in their world, and it has forced them to look at you differently. For a long time, they believed there would always be more time. More time to heal. More time to decide. More time to find the perfect words. More time to become brave enough. But recently they were confronted by a simple realization that unsettled them deeply: you may not remain emotionally available forever. You may continue growing. You may stop waiting for answers. You may build peace without their explanation. And the thought of arriving after your heart has completely closed the door has shaken them more than they expected. They did not expect you to become this strong in their absence. That is part of what they are struggling to process. They remembered the version of you who cared openly, who noticed everything, who gave meaning to small moments, who perhaps would have accepted even a fragment of truth just to understand where you stood. But something in you has been changing. Even if you still love deeply, you are learning not to abandon yourself for uncertainty. Even if you still remember, you are learning that remembering someone does not mean putting your entire future on hold. That growth has created a strange mirror for them. They can no longer comfort themselves with the assumption that you will always be exactly where they left you emotionally. And this is where the hidden story begins to deepen, because the truth they need to tell you is not one simple confession. It is connected to several choices, several fears, and one moment from the past that they have replayed more times than you could imagine. There was a moment when they almost told you everything. You probably did not recognize it when it happened. It may have been during an ordinary conversation, a late-night exchange, a quiet pause, or a moment when their behavior suddenly changed. They were closer to honesty than you knew. The words were there. Their heart was saying, "Say it now." But another voice inside them answered, "Not yet." That hesitation became a turning point. They chose delay, believing delay would protect both of you. Instead, delay created confusion. Silence filled the place where honesty should have stood, and over time, assumptions grew around that silence. You interpreted certain things one way. They interpreted your reaction another way. Two people began responding to stories neither had fully confirmed. And while life kept moving, the truth remained trapped beneath everything. What makes this more emotional for them now is that they finally see the cost of that choice. There are things you blamed yourself for that were never entirely yours to carry. There were moments you wondered whether you were too much, not enough, too emotional, too distant, too trusting, too guarded. They knew more than they admitted. They saw your confusion, yet they convinced themselves that speaking would complicate things. They believed silence was safer. But silence did not protect you. It left you trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. And now, as they look back, they understand that some of your reactions were not failures of love. They were responses to uncertainty they helped create. That realization has humbled them. There is something else they have begun to understand, something even they resisted for a long time. Their feelings did not disappear when distance appeared. They changed shape. Sometimes they became frustration. Sometimes regret. Sometimes nostalgia. Sometimes a sudden urge to know how you were doing. Sometimes jealousy they were ashamed to admit. Sometimes tenderness so strong that they had to distract themselves from it. They tried to reduce what they felt into something manageable, something they could label and place away. But every time they believed they had finally become unaffected, some small reminder of you found its way back into their day. A phrase. A place. A song. A date. A familiar kind of laugh from a stranger. Something would pull the curtain open for a second, and there you were again. Yet feelings alone are not the biggest secret. Stay with this, because this is where their urgency becomes more understandable. They are not simply trying to tell you, "I still care." Those words would be easier. What frightens them is explaining why they behaved in ways that seemed opposite to what they felt. They know that you may ask questions they cannot escape anymore. Why did you go quiet? Why did you let me believe something that was not true? Why did you act distant if you cared? Why did you make choices that pushed me away? Why did you wait this long? They have rehearsed answers to those questions, and every answer leads back to something they have struggled to forgive in themselves. They were afraid of losing control. That fear influenced more of their decisions than you knew. Loving you did not feel casual to them. It activated old wounds, old beliefs, and old survival patterns. They were comfortable when emotions stayed within boundaries they could manage. But with you, something became unpredictable. You saw parts of them they usually kept hidden. You noticed changes in their voice. You sensed when something was wrong. You had a way of reaching emotional rooms inside them they preferred to keep locked. At first, they loved that feeling. Then they became frightened by how much power vulnerability seemed to have. Instead of moving closer, they tried to regain control by creating distance. That distance became a habit, and habits can disguise themselves as personality. They told themselves, "This is just who I am. I need space. I do not owe anyone an explanation. If this connection is real, it will survive." But deep down, they knew the truth was more complicated. Space was not always peace. Sometimes space was avoidance. Silence was not always maturity. Sometimes silence was fear wearing a calm face. And the longer they avoided the real conversation, the harder it became to begin it. Eventually, they were no longer only afraid of the original truth. They were afraid of explaining why they had hidden it for so long. You may be wondering what suddenly changed. Why now? Why is the pressure building now after all this time? The answer begins with something small that happened recently, something that would have looked insignificant to anyone else. They heard something, saw something, or experienced a moment that made your absence feel real in a new way. It was not dramatic on the surface. There was no thunder, no grand sign in the sky. But emotionally, it stopped them. For a few seconds, they saw a possible future in which your life had completely moved forward without them. They imagined you no longer wondering. No longer checking. No longer emotionally turning toward them. They imagined someone else receiving the honesty they kept postponing. And that image disturbed them. For the first time, they understood that losing access to you is not the same as losing ownership over you, because they never owned you. What frightened them was the possibility of losing the chance to be known truthfully by you. They realized you may remember them through the version of the story created by silence rather than the version they wish they had been brave enough to tell. That thought has become unbearable. They do not want their fear to have the final word in your memory. They do not want you to believe they felt nothing when the truth is that they felt too much and handled it badly. They do not want their distance to become the only evidence you ever receive. There is a deep difference between someone missing you and someone becoming ready to take responsibility. Missing is emotion. Responsibility is transformation. What is happening inside them now is beginning to cross that line. They are not only thinking about what they lost. They are thinking about what they did. They are looking at their choices without decorating them. They are recognizing the moments when pride stopped them from reaching out, the moments when they waited for you to make the first move because rejection terrified them, the moments when they wanted reassurance but offered none, the moments when they expected you to understand things they had never clearly communicated. That reflection has been uncomfortable, but it is also the beginning of something more honest. And yet there is still one obstacle standing between their realization and their confession. They do not know whether you will believe them. This matters more than they admit. In their imagination, they have already heard you say, "Why should I trust this now?" They have imagined your silence after hearing everything. They have imagined you telling them that their explanation came too late. They have imagined you listening calmly and then choosing not to return. That possibility is what makes their hand freeze when they think about reaching out. They know that truth does not guarantee reconciliation. They know honesty does not erase consequences. And strangely, this awareness is making their feelings more sincere, because they are beginning to understand that telling you the truth cannot be about controlling your response. They are realizing they may have to speak simply because you deserve clarity, even if clarity does not produce the ending they hope for. That is a major shift in their heart. Before, they wanted certainty before vulnerability. They wanted to know you still cared before risking rejection. They wanted signs that the door was open before approaching it. Now they are beginning to understand that courage does not always come with guarantees. Sometimes courage means telling the truth while accepting that the other person is free to decide what happens next. But there is more, beloved child. There is a particular sentence they have been afraid to say, and it has become the center of everything. They have spoken around it in their own mind. They have replaced it with safer words. They have imagined saying half of it, then stopping. But the truth keeps returning in its complete form. It is not merely, "I miss you." It is not merely, "I made a mistake." It is not even simply, "I still love you." The sentence reaches deeper because it connects their feelings to a decision they made when they were overwhelmed, and that decision changed the direction of the connection. At the time, they believed they were doing what was necessary. They told themselves they were protecting something. Their future. Their family. Their reputation. Their emotional stability. Perhaps even you. But now they see that fear influenced the choice more than wisdom did. They created a version of events that allowed them to keep functioning without facing the full emotional truth. And because you did not have all the information, you were left reacting to the visible consequences rather than the hidden cause. This is why certain things never made sense to you. This is why some pieces seem to contradict each other. What you saw was real, but it was not complete. There may have been a time when you looked at their behavior and thought, someone who truly cared would not do this. They know that. It has haunted them. They also know they cannot use love as an excuse for poor choices. Caring about someone does not automatically mean we know how to treat them well. Feeling deeply does not remove the responsibility to communicate. They have had to face that painful distinction. They can no longer say, "But I loved you," as though love alone should erase the confusion you endured. Instead, they are beginning to say something more mature inside themselves, "I cared, and I still hurt you." Both can be true. If I want to be honest, I must admit both. That acknowledgement is why the atmosphere feels different. Something inside them is no longer protecting their ego the way it once did. The old defenses are weakening. They are tired of arguing with their own heart. They are tired of pretending certain memories do not affect them. They are tired of explaining your connection to themselves in ways that require them to ignore the most obvious truth: you mattered more than they allowed themselves to show. And here is the part they never expected. The more they accept that truth, the more they remember the good things you did that they once overlooked. Not grand gestures. Small things. The way you listened. The way you noticed details. The way you tried to understand them before judging them. The way you gave them emotional space even when that space hurt you. The way you sometimes protected their dignity while carrying your own questions alone. These memories are returning with new meaning because they are finally seeing them through a less defensive heart. There was one thing you did for them that they misunderstood completely. At the time, they thought your action meant one thing. Now they realize it meant almost the opposite. Maybe you stepped back and they assumed you stopped caring. Maybe you stopped asking questions and they assumed you had moved on. Maybe you became quiet and they thought you were punishing them. But now they understand that your silence may have been exhaustion, dignity, self-protection, or your way of honoring a boundary they created. This realization has affected them deeply because they now see that some of the distance they blamed on you was actually the echo of their own decisions. Their heart has begun asking a question they avoided for too long: what if I had been honest earlier? That question has no easy answer. Perhaps things would have changed. Perhaps they would not have. But regret grows in the space between what happened and what might have happened. They are living in that space now, and it is forcing them to look at time differently. They understand that another month of silence could become another year. Another year could turn an unresolved connection into a permanent memory. They do not want to wake up one day and realize they spent an entire lifetime waiting for the perfect moment to say something that only required courage. This is why they feel as though they are running out of time. Again, not because some mysterious clock is about to punish them, but because emotional seasons change. Opportunities change. People heal. Hearts grow. What was possible once may not remain possible forever. They sense that your life is moving, even if they do not know exactly how. They can feel that you are becoming less willing to live inside unanswered questions. And that is pushing them toward the truth. Still, they are watching for something. A sign. A small opening. A reason to believe you would hear them without immediately closing the conversation. They may be checking whether you seem angry, peaceful, distant, happy, changed. They may be trying to understand whether reaching out would disturb you or finally bring clarity. But there is danger in waiting for perfect certainty, because perfect certainty rarely arrives. Their lesson now is to stop trying to predict your response and start taking responsibility for their own voice. There is another layer they have not shared with anyone fully. Someone around them knows more about this connection than you realize. Not everything, but enough to have noticed their emotional struggle. At some point, this person said something that stayed with them. It was not elaborate. It may have been one simple question. If this person truly mattered, why are you still pretending they didn't? Those words struck a place inside them they had been avoiding. They tried to laugh it off. They tried to change the subject. But later, alone, the question returned. That conversation opened a door. For the first time, your soulmate admitted out loud that there were things they never told you. They did not reveal everything, but the confession itself surprised them. Hearing their own voice acknowledge the hidden truth made it harder to return to denial. Once something is spoken aloud, even partially, it becomes more real. The secret begins losing the protection of silence. And this is where the story turns again, because the person listening did not respond the way your soulmate expected. They did not simply comfort them. They challenged them. They said, in essence, that regret without action eventually becomes a choice. That if they know the truth matters, continuing to hide it is no longer something they can blame on confusion. Your soulmate carried those words away like a stone in their pocket. Heavy. Impossible to ignore. Since then, they have been preparing themselves emotionally. They are thinking about how to begin. Not the entire conversation, just the first sentence. They know the first sentence matters because once it is spoken, the rest will follow. They have considered saying, "There is something I should have told you a long time ago." They have considered saying, "I owe you the truth." They have considered beginning with an apology. But every version feels too small compared with what they are trying to explain. The real beginning is not words. It is surrender. They must surrender the desire to control how you see them. They must accept that you may be disappointed. You may need time. You may ask difficult questions. You may forgive them without returning. You may still care while choosing stronger boundaries. All of those possibilities belong to you. Their task is simply to stop hiding. My beloved child, this message is not asking you to chase, decode, or place your life on hold. Your peace matters. Your boundaries matter. Your discernment matters. If someone comes with truth, you are still allowed to take your time. You do not owe immediate trust simply because someone finally becomes honest. Genuine reconciliation, if it is meant to happen, is built with consistency, not pressure. But there is something powerful in knowing that a situation you once thought was emotionally simple may have contained layers you could not see. You are also being reminded of something about yourself. You have survived unanswered questions before. You have learned to keep walking even when closure did not come in the form you wanted. That strength is important now because if this person finally speaks, you must listen from the version of yourself you have become, not from the version of yourself who once begged internally for any answer at all. You are not standing in the same emotional place anymore. And they can sense that. That is why their urgency is growing. They know the next conversation, if it happens, cannot be casual. They cannot return with vague words and expect you to fill in the blanks. They cannot offer nostalgia when what is required is accountability. They cannot say, "I was confused," and leave it there. Too much has happened inside both of you. If they step forward now, they must come with the truth they were once too afraid to carry. But there is one final detail that has made them realize they may need to act sooner than they planned. Something happened very recently. A piece of information reached them. It had to do with you, but not in the way they first assumed. When they heard it, their immediate reaction was not jealousy. It was panic, not dangerous panic, but the sudden emotional shock of realizing that circumstances may be changing faster than they expected. They asked a question. The answer they received was incomplete. And that incompleteness sent their mind racing. For hours, they thought about reaching you. Then they stopped themselves. Then they tried again. They began writing something. They erased it. They started over. What they wanted to ask was simple, but beneath that question was everything they had never said. Because the information they heard made them wonder whether the opportunity they assumed would always be available is already beginning to disappear. And that is when they finally opened the place where they had kept the truth buried. There is something there they have never told you. Something connected to the exact reason they stepped away when their heart was telling them to stay. Something that involves a promise they made, a fear they never admitted, and a choice you were never given the chance to understand. Tonight, in the quiet of their own thoughts, they have reached the sentence they can no longer avoid. They know what they need to tell you. They know why it has to be the whole truth this time. And just before they found the courage to send the first words, one unexpected thing happened that changed what they were about to confess.